it again. And again, I always look at things and we can dwell like hindsight's 2020, all those things. But knowing what I now know, I think that might be a great way to go about it, because now you have the intentionality at front and center. Mm-hmm. And now you can focus on, we'll call it, I know backfilling sounds like sort of like a sloppy way to say it, but you're sort of taking now content and tasks and activities and all of these things, and you're starting to place them in. And some of those as well, like it might be really convenient to toss in, hey, a Dan Meyer task or one of John's tasks or anything, John Rowe, any of those things might fit here and there. But then also that there's going to be some little gaps. And then now it's like, okay, now that I see this gap, it's like I can focus my attention on how can I address that piece and ensure that I'm like kind of pulling out the learning that I'm hoping that know, understand, and do. And for those in the academy who are watching here, I've just been sort of scrolling through this particular sheet, which is your I can statements. At the top, they were I can statements. And then you've sort of taken those I can statements, and it looks like for each concept, I'm just going to flip right to the top here really quickly here. So you have your overall objectives that you've included. So you have like collaboration as an objective that you have. You have reasoning quantitatively. You have reasoning structural, reasoning repetition, algebra, single variable, algebra inequality. So you've I really like how you've started with these big ideas and you've sort of tried to figure out, okay, like what do I want the kids to walk away with? And then you've taken these and you have one I can for each of these, which I think is great because you've essentially focused on, okay, how am I going to hit that for this one concept? So for statistics, I can summarize, represent, and interpret data on a single count or measurement variable. And then now you go, all right, what does that mean? Now, what do I need? What do kids need to know, understand, and do in order for that I can statement to become a reality, right? So I really like how you've sort of started there and you're now kind of fleshing those things out. And I think oftentimes what we do is the opposite because of the way our curriculum is written and designed. You're given all these standards in the US or all these expectations if you're here in Ontario like John and I, and then you're looking to address every single one of these little tiny pieces, and you're not even sure how they all interconnect. And if you go back to that episode number 10 with Jo Boaler, she says something along those lines about this idea of when we create curriculum, we're taking these big ideas, or the curriculum writers are taking these big ideas, and they're chopping them up into a huge number of little tiny pieces, and then they get scattered and the connections are lost. So I just want to make sure that we don't overlook the idea of starting with these big ideas and really going, okay, what do I want these kids to walk away from? Because a lot of the little tiny pieces may get lost along the way, especially if I'm introducing them in little silos, right? I'm introducing this little concept because I have to, but not explicitly connecting it to one of these bigger items. So I love that. I'm wondering, where did these overall big ideas sort of come from for you? Like, what inspired them? Did they come from somewhere, or were they a mix from different places, just for those at home so that they know where they might want to start digging in?
Yeah, so they were definitely a mix. So I've got these 13 objectives. The last 9 are the content objectives. And so I kind of got these big ideas from our district's scope and sequence document. And so for each unit that the district created, there's like a topic, and then it's got, guiding questions, the main objectives, and then essential skills. And I kind of went through all of those to figure out what are these big ideas. And then I rearranged them. So some of the units I thought there were more connections between 2 of them. Then I know that the district did use the textbook a lot in trying to figure out how to break things down, because a lot of our teachers do just teach out of the textbook. And so I kind of wanted to make them a little more connected in some ways. I also didn't want 30 of them, since I'm going to be assessing students on these, just for ease of communication with the kids. And then the collaboration objective I came up with, again, referring back to Jo Boaler, she talks a lot about, and I think you guys have talked about this too, assess what you value. That if you're just assessing the content, then you're not showing them that you value the collaboration or you value the reasoning skills. So I decided to put those in there. The collaboration one I kind of worked on myself. But the routines for reasoning, I actually have the book with me this time by Grace Kellermanick and Amy Lucenta and Susan Jansen Creighton. I pretty much took those reasoning objectives right out of that book. I kind of went through and figured out what are the main ideas in there. They refer specifically to the mathematical practices, the ones that are more thinking oriented, like how do mathematicians think. And my plan is to use some of their routines and reflect that in some way on the assessments. So, I might have kids draw a picture on an assessment to reason quantitatively. So I included those as well. I highly recommend that book.
Can you say the title again?
It's Routines for Reasoning. It's called Fostering the Mathematical Practices in All Students. So it's got a great introduction, and it teaches the mathematical practices through routines specifically to support English language learners and students with learning disabilities.
Michael, I want to go back when you were talking about your big ideas on your sheet and you listed them, and then you said you changed the orders of them around based on some connections. I wonder if you can share which ones you decided to group together and why those ones.
Yeah. So, for example, one of the units in our scope and sequence is just an entire unit on arithmetic sequences. We just kind of deal with the arithmetic sequences separate from solving linear equations and linear relations, whereas I felt that those were inherently linked. So instead of treating arithmetic sequences as its own thing, I felt like the arithmetic sequences could really sort of drive a lot of our investigations into linear equations and even like just solving equations in one variable. And they were super visual. So I think that they'll help a lot with my students in particular. So that's an example of where, even though I know like my colleagues will be spending like 2 weeks or 3 weeks just on arithmetic sequences, I'm just kind of wrapping that in to everything else. So I won't specifically be like teaching that as a unit. It's just going to, I'm just going to bringing it up as we go through single variable and algebra and the linear relations.
That's a great example of how textbooks or other documents have chunked things up to keep them separate, but you can save time by linking other things together.
Yeah, like I'm looking here. I just scrolled down to so that's your fifth objective. So algebra, I can write linear expressions and equations in one variable and use them to solve problems. And I see you have 4 knowledge sort of chunks or objectives here. So you have A sub n is the nth term of a sequence A. The order of operations is something you want them to know. The absolute value of a number is the distance from, and so on and so forth. And then a linear expression or equation contains a single variable with no exponents or radicals. So you've got some key pieces for things you want kids to know, like when they walk out of there. And then you also have some key things for understanding as well. And you can see that you've sort of taken these ideas, and traditionally they're separate, but you're bringing them together. And it's kind of, you're sequencing it in a slightly different way than a textbook would. And I feel like you're providing students with a rich opportunity to make those connections so that they don't just see it as some couple day thing and then you move on and you never come back to it. So super cool. I love it.
Yeah. And you might also notice I put some little, I guess, symbols in there, C squared and P squared. I put in some little indicators.
Yeah, I love it. So your C squared, it looks like, is the common concept throughout.
Yeah, throughout.
P squared, use in purposeful practice. So
yeah,
I really like how you've kind of like thought those things through. Like, what does that mean for you as I was
going through? Yeah, so this was a process I went through before I actually started spiraling the tasks. And I went through and I counted all the, what can students do? Like, what do I want them to do? And the 9 objectives, I had like 90 do statements. I was like, well, I can't, I've got 180 days. I don't want to break them down and be, okay, today we're working on that one. And I realized that there were some that were like bigger ideas or concepts or things you might bring up in task. And that there were a lot others that just either were kind of like an extension of something. So like I can solve equations for which there's one solution, multiple solutions, no solutions, and infinitely many solutions. That might not be something I'm going to find a task for, but that would be like I'm thinking of like maybe an open middle problem or something where you give kids and say, okay, here's some sort of prefab equation with some blanks in it. I want you now to fill in the numbers so that, there's one solution or no solutions or infinitely many solutions. And it can be something to get kids thinking about it where it's not necessarily a task, but it's a great kind of like extension, purposeful practice. If students are understanding solving equations really well, it's something to kind of bite their teeth into and practice, but it's not something I need to go out and try to find a task for.
And I think too, sometimes you can even take that idea of what is a task, and maybe for some people, like I know I used to always think like it has to be a 3-act math task for everything, but like an open middle, I would call that an open middle task as well. It just might be serving, or it might be coming from like a different angle. So, from the angle of like a challenge or whatever it might be, but it could still kind of come under that umbrella of task. So just things for people to think about at home, that we don't have to have this really like flashy task for everything. Like sometimes it's the challenge. And as we build that culture of like not answer getting, but for like actually doing the math and like actually challenging ourselves and building productive struggle, or at least this willingness to engage in productive struggle, I think those opportunities for grabbing tasks, as long as there's something there, like that element, it's like for me, like curiosity is always great, but challenge is another reason, right? Or just like when it's a puzzle, right? Like you give them something that's more like a puzzle, and it's like you really have to do some deep thinking about it as well. It might not necessarily have this super flashy context, but don't feel bad if you want to label that activity as a purposeful task, right, in your classroom.
Yeah, you just summarized. I was taking notes about how I was going to kind of respond as you were saying, and you just addressed everything I was going to say. So I think the only thing I'll add to that, just so we're clear, because I haven't talked about my general plan, and I think it might help because I started formulating my general plan as I was going through and doing these. And I kind of work backwards from how much time we have in the school year and thinking about them not as individual chunks, but as like a complete spiral. Like, what's a complete spiral going to look like? And as I was thinking about that, I was like, okay, well, let's say a complete spiral is like 2 weeks. I can do between 13 and 16 complete spirals depending on time. And that will give me a lot of flexibility. Then as I break those down, what am I going to be doing in those 2-week chunks? And the way I was thinking about tasks was like, those are the introductory ideas. So like, I'm going to use a task, and a task is something that I'm going to spend like maybe a couple days on, maybe doing a follow-up task, but they might not be things where it's like, okay, I'm now going to get into the nitty-gritty of the consolidation phase. It's like, this is like, let's get the big ideas out. And then as I follow up to that, I'll have these consolidation days where we then talk about some of the ideas. I don't have a great idea of how I'm going to do that yet, but I was thinking a lot of it was still going to be that curiosity, deeper thinking, task-based. Well, let's look at this. I was thinking a lot of, are you familiar with Sarah Vanderwerf?
Yep.
Yes. Yeah, we just brought her up on the last episode we recorded. John referenced her, one of her sessions. So
yeah, I saw one of her sessions about the same time that I became familiar with you guys. And she's got this great line. And let's see if I can not butcher it. It's like, students will see it before I show them, and they'll say it before I tell them.
That's the line.
That's the line John used.
you actually said it better than I did. Then I tried to reference it on the last episode.
And I actually have that at the top of, like, I've got my own little HyperDoc. I have that at the top of my HyperDoc as the idea of being like, if I'm going to take this task and I'm going to try to consolidate it, I don't imagine myself sitting there and saying, hey, why don't we try this? I imagine myself hosting a solution that somebody else did and say, hey, this person or this student or whatever did this. What did they do? Why did it work? Like, compare and contrast it to what you did, and have them kind of think about those things so that even in that consolidation, I'm not just talking at them. And so I've got that idea of this purposeful practice. And so when I look and say like, oh, this is like a great purposeful practice question, it's like, I'm not going to spend a bunch of time revisiting this concept. I'm not going to spend a bunch of time like hashing this out. This is something that we can kind of extend with our thinking, maybe bring it up once or twice, but it's like within the main idea is kind of an extension, but it's not something that I need to devote like 3 days in a row to. And then the other one was the like a concept throughout, where I realized that some of these ideas would just naturally come out in the task and the purposeful practice of everything else. So I didn't really need to focus on those as things to find activities or tasks for either.
What's an example of one like that?
I can create linear expressions and equations in one variable that describe quantities and their relationships. So in my mind, students are going to be doing that when they're doing a task. Students are going to be doing that when they're working with sequences. Students are going to be doing that when they're working with linear relations and systems of linear relations. That's just something that's going to carry throughout. So as I come up with the task and I'm trying to be intentional, and it's like, okay, I might go down to something that I actually care about, like as a key idea, like I can solve linear equations in one variable using the distributive property. I'm going to sit there and say, okay, well, I don't just want to give them an expression with the distributive property. I want them to create a linear expression using the distributive property in one variable and then use what they know about that to solve it. So I'll be referring back, and that kind of guides me to say, okay, how am I going to teach this task? Like, what am I going to come up with? How am I going to present this? And it's something that I will be referring back to. My general plan is probably to print the list out, and as I hit them, do a little check mark so I can kind of keep track of what I've covered when to make sure I'm kind of gathering all the ideas and they're all coming out. That's my general plan with this.
Yeah, very cool. Like, and I'm seeing too, like, as I'm looking through your list of do's, a lot of these are really awesome. And I feel like over time, they may, as like you go through this, it might lead to more understands. Because like I'm looking at, for example, like the 5, for people watching in the academy, like 5.D.5.D, which I believe is like your 5th objective. It's a do, and it's the 5th do, and it's ABCD. So you've got this like structured and organized really well, probably way easier for you to navigate than maybe someone else who comes in for the first time. But I look at that one, I see it says like, I can use the structure of an equation to help me solve the equation. For example, 2x plus 1 all over 3 is equal to 5/3 means 2x plus 1 equals 5. And, like even just this idea of like, I'm picturing like a student who understands what that's all about would be a student who could actually model both sides of the equation into 3 groups, or it's 1/3 the size on either side. And this other equation is 3 times bigger. So that like tripling and thirding idea exists there that we can pull out a number talk. So there's so many things here that I think because you've organized this so well, that over time, you're going to probably see some of these ideas maybe flip-flop or maybe mirror in some ways in different areas of like the know, understand, do part. Because I always found like for me, I was big on the know part for a really long time. And then after some time, I started shifting some of those into the do's, whether I realized I was doing this or not. And now I'm sort of really heavily into the understands part. And like the know and do's come out through the understanding in a lot of ways. So, just something that I'm kind of noticing. I have my own little epiphany here as I'm going through this document. And I feel like you're the type of person, Michael, that as you go through and you have these little epiphanies as you go along, I can picture you having no problem with sort of pivoting from that plan and maybe revising or creating this new version of the document and kind of doing the revisions over there and changing it for next time. So I want people who are watching and listening to kind of be getting the sense that you don't have to have like a finalized document or plan that you're going to do for the rest of time, because that will really, really limit you in how effective you can be. And I worked with some educators, like amazing educators who I would call them like leaders, like math content leaders in my own district. And they've done something similar, not from a spiraled approach, but from like a scope and sequence approach. And they put so much effort into it. But now I feel like they've gotten to a place where they're sort of like stuck because they don't want to change anything, right? They put so much like sweat, blood, tears, not so much blood, but the tears and the sweat into this document that now they feel like if they make any changes, they'll ruin it. And I think that's something that we want to make sure people at home know is like, you don't have to start this process and feel like it's got to be complete or like in its final draft the first time you use it. It's sort of like it's the process, I think, of learning. Like, do you feel like this has helped you better learn your course content from just engaging in this process at all, Michael?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd also like to echo what you were saying with that. And you talked about this on the last episode I was with you too as well, about flexibility. And as I was creating these, I had this idea that, as I go through the year, I bet more things are going to come out and I'll just add them. And that will be totally fine because I'm one person and I don't have a buddy I'm working with on this. So it's like, I know there are things that I'm going to miss. especially as I'm going through and doing these for my other courses as well, where I'm not as familiar with the content, I realize, okay, I'm going to be able to add things to it. You also just kind of answered one of the questions I think that I was going to ask you later, which is, do you spiral by those essential understandings or do you spiral by the skills? And so it sounds like you were saying that you try to spiral by those key understandings, and I've gone the other direction. So I thought it would be a lot easier in terms of like organizing by task or like organizing how I'm going to teach, to do it by the skills, and just keep in mind that as I'm doing that, I need to focus on those essential understandings. So I thought that was interesting from like a beginner's perspective. It seems like going through and saying, okay, well, we're going to solve simple linear equations first, and then we might bring up the distributive property, and then multiple terms on a side, combining like terms, and then variables on both sides. That would be like a natural progression where these equations get a little bit more complex, and that as I'm spiraling, I can start with just like the simple ones, and the next spiral through, I'll, introduce something with maybe multiple terms, and then after that, variables on both sides, and after that, the distributive property. It seemed for a novice to be easier than say, well, I'm going to focus on expressing relationships, and then I'm going to focus on equations as a process of reasoning and explaining that reasoning. Like, I don't see how to do that yet.
I think what Kyle is saying is that, we've said it already too. It's like, there's not really one way to do this. And like you said, that you are ready to modify this whenever you need to. And I think I have revamped my plan for my grade 9 class every semester. I have an outline of the way I think it might run, but then it doesn't flow that way because of the pivoting in the moment. So, we've talked about different ways to spiral on the last one. Like, do you spiral by, like Kyle's suggesting, or, you can spiral by big idea and then think about always those big ideas. Some people spiral by like the conceptual and then move to more specifics afterwards. Like, think about one teacher was spiraling everything by doing graphs and pictures, right? Everything was represented by graphs, pictures, concrete materials. And then the next time was like, I'm going to slowly integrate abstract representations eventually. And by the end, we're doing those same ideas over and over again, but we're getting more specific. That would be big idea down to more specific skill sets. And starting with skill sets and then going big ideas also can work. And there's nothing wrong with that idea. I think the biggest piece of why spiraling is so great is doing what you're doing right now. Like Kyle said, you are becoming like a master of the curriculum right now. Like, you are understanding so much more about the connections between math concepts as a teacher. And all that is doing, like, you making this plan is preparing you to be flexible on the fly. Right? Like, you're going to be able to know the connection. Like, you've done all the hard work to see these connections in the curriculum that you have to teach, or the standards that you have to teach. But so that when you're in the classroom and you see a student doing a solution here, you know where that fits in the plan. And you're going to be ready to modify whatever you need to do on that. Like, I think that is the biggest, in my opinion, takeaway of trying to spiral your course. It's you're becoming a master of the math. And that's going to help you in the classroom.
And just to kind of echo what John's saying as well, like, I think you just nailed it. And I picked your 8th overall objective here, this algebra objective, and it involves systems of linear equations, inequalities, and 2 variables. My apologies if, you're an early elementary teacher and you're thinking like, what the heck are we talking about? But the reason I picked this one was because it is kind of like you've got it chunked down into the least number of parts here. And I think John just mentioned this idea that how you choose to sort of frame or organize things, the one thing that we just don't want to forget is that the end goal is that overall objective at the top there, right? So that's a big thing. And then when I go one step removed from that, I go like, when I say solve systems of linear equations, like, what are kids thinking about? What are they conceptualizing? And what is their conception of what that is all about? Like, in their mind, could they tell me that, oh, okay, so you're talking about a scenario where there's like 2 taxis, one taxi starts with this flat rate and then it increases by this amount, and this other taxi doesn't have a flat rate and it just increases by this amount. And we want to know essentially when one's the better deal over the other. To me, that's like a conception about solving linear systems of equations where that student's going like, I get what we're trying to accomplish here. And then I think when you go down a step deeper than that, so we take one more shovel out, then we start to go, okay, so like, how can I actually do those things? And I guess my only caution for folks is to kind of avoid what I did for a very long time, which was trying to check off those individual skills. And at the end, I tried to like bow them together, like tie them together into this big like clump to go like, there is your overall objective. Whereas I think by doing so, it was harder for kids to take these separate pieces and glue them together rather than starting with this like big idea piece, which we just sort of described what that big idea is, right? So we're like, that's it. Hey guys, gals, this is all we got. This is the big thing that we want to do. Here's the hard part. The hard part is there's so many different ways to attack it. It's kind of like, look at our conversation about spiraling. Spiraling is this. We dig deeper and deeper and deeper. We don't want to forget the overall goal of why we wanted to spiral in the first place. Like, it's so easy for me to dig deep enough, and then all of a sudden I find myself trying to mix as many concepts together as possible, because that's what the word spiraling reminds me of. It's like just this blender, like hit the blender and now it's spiraled. But wait a second, what am I doing this for again? Oh yeah, I'm doing it because I want to make sure that the concepts are accessible by all students in the class and for as long as possible in my class, so we don't dig too deep too fast. I want to make sure kids retain it, meaning that I'm now giving them an opportunity to come back to ideas. And I also look at that skill piece as like, whenever I come back to an idea, regardless of the choice of how you choose to spiral, I come back to an idea, but then I start a step below where students are ready. Meaning like, I'm going to start like a little bit behind where we left off last time. And it's not going to consume a lot of time. It's going to actually allow it to make sure everybody's on that bus with me, or everyone's on that elevator with me. And we're going to go up a level together, instead of saying, well, this is where we got off the elevator last time. Let's everyone get on. When in reality, we're like, wait a second, a bunch of kids are not on that floor. They either didn't retain it, they didn't get it the first time, whatever it was. Now I'm giving them that second opportunity to kind of practice some of those skills. And then those skills kind of come along the way. Like at the end of the day, if a student doesn't know how to solve by graphing, substitution, and elimination, like those are three big ideas. It's like, can they do one of those? That's way better to me than doing all three of those and not realizing why they did any of it, right? Which was like my whole beginning of my teaching career. They could do those three things, but they didn't realize that you could have used any of those three in all those scenarios, or that one of those was way easier to do in this scenario than in that scenario. So I know that was a mouthful, but just some things to kind of think about anyway.
I was going to bring that example up because that skill about solving systems of equations, I remember teaching it exactly that. It would be like, you would go, okay, we're going to solve where two lines cross by graphing, and then we're going to solve by substitution. And sometimes kids see the connection between those two and don't. And now I'm going to solve it by elimination. And then you're going to go, hey, by the way, that was three different ways to solve any problem where you had two equations and two unknowns. And now on our last day before the test, we're going to throw them all, and now we're going to say, which way would you do it now? Like, it makes a huge amount of sense, like you said, Kyle, to start with the whole idea of like, I want to figure this out. Like the way I've modified it this last few years, I think was based on some of the work from Alex Overwick. And, you know, the first lesson is, like you said, also like really low so that everyone can do it. It's like, hey, there's 4 Jubes and 3 Smarties at this store, and they cost this much cents. And the same store, there's 3 more Jubes and 5 Smarties that cost this much. Here's a whole bunch of pennies. Here's the pennies themselves. Here's something that can represent Jubes. Here's something that can represent Smarties. Take the pennies that those combination is supposed to add to for the one situation. Here's the pennies for the other situation. Put the pennies on the counters, put the pennies on those shapes, and make it work. Like, what are kids really doing there? Like, very concrete, very hands-on, and then slowly start to build up into those other things. Like, start with that big idea about like, we're trying to figure out what these values are in these situations. Then by the end, you don't have to go like, oh, okay, now we're going to do the problem-solving day, where we have to decide, like you've been deciding the whole way through to begin with.
Yeah, I'm just playing in the background here, John. I don't know if you see it, but just sharing my screen, showing the Counting Candy sequel. And, you know, that first video doesn't show a whole lot, but it's just sort of gives you a quick glimpse of 3 groups or 3 colors of candies. And then we zoom in on it so you can't see it. And then basically the big question that kids are really having to figure out is like, listen, if I know there's 57 chocolates in total, they're just different colored candies. I know there's 44 blue and pink. there's 35 blue and purple. And then I've just got a summary of all three of those pieces of information, like how many of each color are there? And I usually use this task way before we even introduce this idea of solving systems of linear equations at all. And what happens is, rather than me teaching it, what ends up happening is kids do all kinds of really cool solution strategies. Like they just use basic arithmetic to figure this out. Like students take the total candies, they subtract 44 blue and pink, and they know that's how many purple there must be. Right? So right away, they're using this idea of elimination without even realizing it. They're even using some substitution in some cases. And meanwhile, for me, I would have done it like this big long way. Like when I show on the task site, I'll include it in the show notes. But you see this big long solution where I'm like taking stuff and substituting this into that and this into this. And students have done this in like 13 seconds flat because they have that understanding of what it is that they're trying to achieve. So that just sort of popped into my mind as John was sharing there. But I'm wondering if we could pause for a moment and get your thoughts there, Michael, on this idea of starting with the idea of spiraling and like how you want to be thinking about organizing, and then also just in terms of the intentionality of the content that you're going to be delivering.
Yeah, perfect. And that might be a great segue too. So first of all, I just took a page of notes on what you just said and wrote takeaway, because you always ask what's your key takeaway, and that's a stressful moment. So,
You're on the
so I was
spot.
writing this down. I really appreciate that idea of always going back. That was like an idea I had, not something that was like forefront in my mind, that whatever skill I'm working on, make sure it's going back to this main concept and that students understand how it's all connected. That is my intention. But I also see how it could be really easy to say, oh, well, now we're solving these linear equations by graphing, or linear systems by graphing or whatever. And now we're going to solve them with substitution and have them kind of unrelated. I kind of had this idea as you were speaking, like one really good way of doing that is to maybe use the same context. Like I can see you've got something where graphing is a nice way of solving it. And then just take the same context, modify the numbers where they just don't work out, where the students try to graph it. I don't even know. I might give students this problem. None of them might try. I might give them an introductory task and none of them might graph. Mm-hmm. So right. That might be a place where I pivot. And it's like, okay, so now we're talking about these types of problems. And my plan too, now that I'm thinking of it, I really like John's idea of these mastery days. And part of my plan with the mastery days, that's going to be the day when like we go through and I formally introduce the content objectives, where it's like we were working on solving systems of linear equations. And we can talk about like, what does that mean? And what were some of the different types of problems we solved? And how are they connected? How are they similar? How are they different? And it seems like those might be really great days as well to kind of make some of those connections. So I had those like two ideas.
I just wanted to make sure before we move on, just the idea of like really taking advantage of context and not trying to overdo new contexts all the time. I did that forever. And even before pre-transformation for me, when I would go and I would try to make questions for kids to do in my class, I would try to make like 13 different contexts every day. It was like this problem, then this problem that's completely unrelated, and then this problem. It's like I spent so much of my own planning time and then also like teaching time helping kids to wrap their heads around a new context rather than taking that one context, spending a little extra time up front to get them to really understand it and to feel like they own the context, and then building ideas off of that, right? So you can juice them, like just totally wring them of all that they're worth and not worry so much about. Like curiosity to me is like really important at the beginning of an idea, beginning of a concept, especially when you're culture building in your classroom. But as you go and as trust builds and kids are comfortable in your non-threatening classroom environment, I feel like sometimes you don't have to rely on that so much, because now it's just like they know what they're here for. It's like there's no fear. We're here to like dive into some really, really important concepts. And it's not just about answer getting. It's about like math and discovering, how math works and fueling that sense making. John, what were you going to say? Hopefully I didn't just steal your entire mouthful there.
I wanted to talk about the mastery days. And just when you said about the making consolidations on those days, like that's a great idea. But I just wanted to remind you, like, don't forget it's so important that on the day you do a task or the day you do a learning objective or a learning goal, to make sure by the end of that, right? It's like, we're going to talk exactly about what we did then too. So it's like, when you said it, I got the image that you were waiting until a mastery day to talk about, hey, remember back on Monday when we did this thing? Oh, what we were doing was this thing over here. I think I would want you to do that both days, right? Like, it's like, do that on the day you're doing it, so that it's like we're consolidating on what we're really doing here. Like, what is the point of today? Like, Dan Meyer, I remember seeing him, and he said that one of the things you could do at the end of a lesson was, like, he had kids title the lesson, right? It's like, people always want to put up front what the learning goals should be at the very beginning of a lesson. And we've talked many times, I think, on the podcast about withholding that a little bit until later. And at the end is a great time to do that. Like, what is the learning goal here today? Like, if you had to title this lesson, what would you title it? And then you can help shape what that title might be with attaching the learning goal to it. It's like asking someone their big takeaway. Like, what did you get out of this lesson today? And making sure everybody kind of walks away with, oh, that was related to yesterday's work, or that was related to the task we did a month ago. So, but it's also a great idea to do it on those mastery days where you spend kind of consolidating some stuff.
That's a great point, John. I didn't even think about that piece, but now that you're mentioning it, I know for a fact that there was many years I was teaching where I thought that kids were getting it through the inquiry process, but oftentimes that's not the case. Like, there's some kids that completely miss the point. It's kind of like when you're watching a movie, right? And like, you're totally in this movie and you totally get what's going on. And then the next person, nudges you and says like, wait, who is that person on the video, right? And you're like, it's the bad guy. Like, it's like, how obvious to me was that, but to you, it wasn't, and I think in math class, it's even more so. Like, it's so much easier for me to drift. I'm sitting in class and I just sort of drift off for just even a moment and I miss that key piece. So I think kind of having a starting and an ending each day, like each lesson, with some sort of consolidation to make sure that there was very explicit as to like, hey, friends, this is why we did what we did today. Like, it's great when a student comes up with it and they can share it, but then you're still reiterating it, right? So if you can use student work and, use those 5 practices to kind of select and sequence the work and share, letting 3 students share, not everybody share, but then you sort of taking that and going, okay, based on what this student said, I'm going to rephrase what they said to make sure that everybody's clear, because maybe they weren't clear in how they said it. Because that's the other thing. I hear a student say something and I connect the dots because I already know what they're trying to say. What about the kids who don't know what they're trying to say, right? So I have to sometimes restate what the kids are saying. And then I go to this group and I let them share and I say, hey, can you just share about this part over here? Because like, we already know about this part. I really liked your strategy over here. Maybe it's that graphing idea that came out. They share that, and then you can share something you liked about it, but then maybe extend it a little bit further. And then you go to that third group. And then finally, like, now you have to sort of think about, okay, now given what they're sharing, what can I do to help and actually deliver some value here? Like, I definitely don't want people to hear John and I speaking, thinking that Kyle and John only sit on the side or meddle in the middle, like Jennifer Waddle said on the recent episode there, John. I love that. But I think the consolidation, though, is one of those times where we can't be fearful to say what needs to be said, clarify what needs to be clarified. Otherwise, what I think can happen, and what happened in my classroom for many years, was some kids got it, but a lot of kids didn't. And then the result of that is that people call the type of learning in that environment like discovery-based math curriculum. And people will say discovery math is a poor way to go. And I'm going to agree. Discovery math with no intentionality and no like sort of like clear, explicit explaining of the concepts is sort of aimless for a lot of students. And again, like I said, I did it for years. I know there were kids who left and I wasn't clear, concise enough, explicit enough. And partially was because of my fear of like, no, I'm not allowed to do this in this style of more progressive teaching. That was one fear, which I think is a misconception. But then the other part was, I don't think I really understood the mathematics well enough. And that's what I was referencing earlier about like a lot of those do's. As you start to continually dive deeper into the concepts, a lot of those will start to become concepts and things you want kids to be able to like understand and really own. And as I started to own more of the math learning, I was able to help students sort of explicitly see those concepts and sort of pull at them. So any thoughts there? I saw you writing a few things down. So we'll let you kind of like share your thinking, and John and I will settle down for a moment.
Yeah, I think I just wrote about 4 pages. So first of all, I'm a math nerd, and more specifically a teaching nerd. So when I say this, I hope people don't judge me, but literally like my adrenaline's pumping right now with these ideas. Like I'm so excited because that's something I've really struggled with. And I tend to be like an all or nothing kind of person. So this idea that, yeah, no, it's okay to consolidate and specifically tie to the big ideas. It reminds me of a colleague who just this last year I was working with her, and she was doing an inquiry task with drawing right triangles with the same angle to kind of explore some trig ratios. And so she asked her students at the end of the class, like, what was the purpose of this activity? And a kid raised their hand and they were very proud of themselves. And they said, we drew triangles and measured the side lengths. It's like they completely didn't understand what they were doing or why they were doing it. Mm-hmm. So I actually just, as you were doing that, I've got this overall template for each kind of day. And I added in, with the concept introduction days, the mastery days, consolidation days, I wrote in consolidate, tie to big idea. Like, why are we doing this? What are the concepts? That this isn't something where, you have I was thinking about having students write a reflection. If you click there, Kyle, on my day-to-day in that green, you can see my, yeah, so here's a link to my year-long day-by-day plan. Yeah, there you go. Beautiful. Initially, when I was going to spiral, by the way, I was just going to do it like this, and I realized that had no flexibility in it. So I pivoted once again, but I've got these kind of like, this is where I'm going to kind of link my lessons, put all the links and stuff so I have it all organized. And I've got these big ideas, like I'm going to have an engaging start every day. I'm going to teach through some sort of task, maybe some purposeful practice or formative assessment for learning, reflections, exit tickets. On some days, I've got community building and mindfulness tapped in there as well. And so I just added, that consolidate, tie to that big idea. That's really exciting for me, because I think that's something that I was, and I probably still will struggle with a little bit, especially with having a lot of English learners. Again, I got really excited about that idea of like juicing that context. Like one that I was thinking of was the stacking paper, because you can take that from just proportional reasoning, like all the way through systems of equations. You just have a different height table and different stack sizes of paper and have them figure out, like at what number of stacks will they be the same height? And you can kind of use that context. And I think tying that context will also like help them realize like, oh, these are the big ideas. This is how they connect. This is the purpose of what we're doing. How is this one different from the last problem? I love that idea of starting a little bit behind. It also answers another one of my questions, like, what do you do for the kids who missed a day, missed that task day, or, came in partway through the year, that starting that little bit behind kind of gets them caught up as well. And then it makes those connections explicit. Like, what was the strategy here? What was the strategy there? And what were the main ideas? That was incredibly helpful.
It brings up a lot of ideas for me specifically lately about what notes look like, or at the end, like if you're going to consolidate at the end, like what does that format look like as a takeaway for students? Like you had mentioned, like a reflection, but what I've been thinking about lately is, especially for my applied level students, like what does that note look like, who are probably terrible at taking notes themselves, not dedicated enough to write notes down. They're disorganized. I'm spending a lot of time lately on what should that takeaway look like so that students have something to look back on if they need to. Because for a long time, I was like, if they do a lot of work, and I still believe this, if they do a lot of math thinking and math doing in my classroom for my hour and 15 minutes with them, do they need to take any notes away to reflect on and to look back on? In the higher levels, I get, and I'm thinking, yes, I think they do need something to look, not necessarily look back on, but to the act of writing it down, I think is important. And they can reflect on it later, but it's like, what does that take away at the end so that when they write it down, we have the big idea written down, it's connected to the big idea we looked at before. There might be an example written in there. I'm really concerned or interested in what people's notes look like now. I used to tell my kids, that you should take pictures of the work that they did, and that acts as their note. But I still think that, there's so much value in consolidating the learning that they did that they can take away. Like, I'm really interested in the interactive notebooks that I've seen floating around the internet and resources. Some of those are like the foldables and the flip books. Like, some of those can act as a great resource. So I'm really interested in that. I'm still kind of exploring what is the best way that a consolidation piece at the end of a lesson looks like, so that there's something to take away. What have you looked at,
I don't
Michael?
know if this is something that you'll care about at all. You might just want to cut this from the thing, as it's not really related to spiraling, but it's something I've worried about. And as I've been trying to incorporate all these new things, that reflection piece was a big idea. So I just, in the chat notes, I linked 2 documents. We have our district hired a company, I think it's called EL Achieve, and they do this thing called constructing meaning. And so I went to this workshop, which is all about providing academic language support. So they talk about the bricks and the mortar, meaning that you've got your brick language, which is all the vocabulary that you do in class, like the math vocabulary. But then you've got all this connecting language that kids don't necessarily know how to use, especially English language learners. So do you see the links in the chat notes?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So if you click those and open those, one of them I kind of used, I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about their stuff, but I kind of adapted it from what they did. So if you click on the other one first, you can kind of see how I'm planning on doing this.
We'll include a link. I just pulled up elachieve.org.
Okay.
So, you're properly citing, and we'll throw it in the show notes and in the Academy as a link, as well as a resource people can look at.
Okay.
So I'm sure they'll appreciate that.
Okay. So what they do is, in that paragraph writing, they don't know how to do that. And so I've come up with this, and it kind of gets to the idea, and the question I took specifically out of Jo Boaler's Mathematical Mindsets book, where she had her reflection question, which I initially was going to just throw at the kids. And as John was saying, I realized kids aren't going to necessarily know what to do there. They're not going to know what to write. And so you come up with this idea of a paragraph, and the kids can literally, they don't need to use it, but if they don't know how to start or what to say, they can kind of use this framework where it's the main idea or concept of the, in the checkbox is lesson, problem, activity, discussion, or other thing. And then you've got the verb examined, addressed, introduced, supported, explored. And then the next box, the idea of the relationship between, the importance of, the reasons for, the difference between. And then they can kind of fill that in and explain it with the content language. And it goes all the way through, the introduce, the explain and describe, support with key ideas. So, blank is a key detail or is an example or is essential information that illustrates or that explains or that suggests blank because blank. I've actually gone through and I just took a topic and wrote a couple of examples of what those paragraphs might look like. This is something I plan on explicitly teaching with my students. So the first time we do this, we're probably going to do it together. And it might even be the first 10 times we do it together. And I was thinking this would be a way that students could, even if they feel like they have an exemplary one, they can share it with me and I can share it to the class through Google Classroom. So it's a way for kids to kind of consolidate that information. As I was doing this, though, I realized, John was saying as well, is that even if you have this great reflection, it might not include everything. So in the reflection and notes document, which was the one you had linked to before, Kyle, I've got the topic. And that's the title of the lesson. What's the topic? I don't fill that out for them. It's what would you title this lesson? You've got, the space for the question, their response, and then any other notes that they feel would be relevant. So they could put in an illustration, an example problem, maybe if they didn't write it out, an efficient method, maybe a side comment that a kid made, an alternate strategy, that they've got a lot of flexibility in doing that. And this might be a place where, as we work on this, either the day of the task, if the task is short enough, I only have 57 minutes, or the next day during a consolidation phase, we trade these things. We have kids write feedback on them. We discuss something that maybe was helpful that they found in the students' notes, and we use that to kind of get to the main big ideas as well. I mean, I don't know if this is going to work. I've never done it, but I felt like I needed a plan.
It's good.
All right. So, Michael, we've been doing a lot of chatting here. This has been super, super helpful. I'm in this tab here with it looks like your objectives that are sort of like summarized a little bit here. You've got a list of tasks and objectives. What did you do next with those in order to start like framing out what this is going to look like as the new school year quickly approaches for you in California?
Yeah, so where we left off at the last discussion that we had, I'd started looking for tasks and I figured I needed a way to kind of organize them. And so as I was going through tasks, just searching websites, I created a list of all my main objectives and started just linking them in no particular order. And I realized to spiral, I was going to need a little bit more organization than that. So I took the progression idea, and on that second tab, I broke down every topic like algebra, geometry, and statistics, and I broke them down into the main progressions and the main ideas. And so once I did that, I was able to sit down, kind of write out any prerequisites I thought kids might need in order to deal with those, and then go back to that first tab where I listed tasks and figure out, well, where do they kind of fit in here? It's not that I'm going to necessarily use them all, especially as we've talked now about, juicing those contexts, but I kind of have a menu of tasks to use, and I'm sure I'll be adding to this list as we go along. And then came the task of actually spiraling it. And this is where I had some concerns. I've learned a lot in our discussion today, but on that third tab, one of my biggest concerns has been our benchmark assessments, because the way that we teach it, even though it's integrated, we really spend the first semester and we do algebra, and we do the second semester geometry and statistics. And so I know that all my colleagues are going to be getting to all these, like going in depth into all the algebra concepts right away. And so I had to kind of figure out, how was I going to spiral these out while at the same time preparing my students for these benchmark assessments. So I kind of worked on a compromise. So instead of saying, okay, well, I'm just going to do every topic, all the basic concepts of algebra, geometry, and stats, and then just move down equally, I decided to kind of like striate them or whatever. So I highlighted the ones that I'm focusing on, and that's going to roughly correlate to what the rest of the school's doing at that time. So if you look at that, you're looking at the screen here. I'll give a quick description of the spreadsheet for those that are listening. I've got 5 columns. The first one's just a cycle number. So that's going to refer to like maybe a 2.5 week cycle. I'll be flexible with that. And then I've got an algebra concept, a geometry concept, a statistics concept, and any other topics that I think should be revisited or reviewed either through purposeful practice or maybe some homework problems or warm-ups. And I figured these are going to be like the main ideas I'm going to take out of it. And the process I went through is I went through the progression, and I kind of figured out, how do these progressions build? And I started with the simpler ones and just started building them in until they became more and more complex. Then I went through, I did the same thing with geometry, realizing that we're going to want to hit some of those bigger ideas more in that second semester when we're going to have those benchmark assessments. So I saved some of those like big ideas of congruence and triangle angle relationships and proof until then. I like the idea of introducing those concepts earlier, but because I'm going to have to spend a little bit more time on algebra so that my students are ready for the final and the benchmark assessments, I kind of had to like make some choices about what I wanted to do. Awesome. So that's how I kind of organized my spirals.
So clearly the amount of planning you have put into this is so key. So if someone, is listening at home and they're like, well, I want to try doing this, or, and again, when we say spiraling, it's not like a this or that. It's like, it might be dipping your toes in and you might just make certain modifications. But I think all of this pre-planning you've done is huge. And I think it probably makes this process of actually trying to organize things make so much more sense. I really want to also reference how you've taken things and you've really tried to show them on a bit of a progression, which is great, or a trajectory, as some people might call it. And you had mentioned earlier that John and I are big on really thinking about the mathematics of like, where does it come from and where is it going, and trying to figure out of like, how am I going to organize this along a trajectory? It doesn't necessarily all have to happen one after the other, but we just want to make sure that it's in at least a reasonable order, right, as things are happening. And then how do those trajectories or those progressions sort of interconnect, if any? So super cool. I love that. And then I love this spiraling plan as well, where you've got kind of things, you're focusing on different things as you go. And I got to assume, and again, it's an assumption, you'll find out after this year as you do this, but by introducing things and not sort of like doing all the algebra at the beginning, and then all the geometry, I think that's going to have some positive results on those benchmarks later, because it's not like it's all gone and then you don't see it for X number of weeks while you're doing geometry. So I think that constant mix is really going to serve students well, despite the fact that you might not get as deep into certain things as maybe you might have in the past. So it'll be really cool to see how that goes. John, any reflections on that?
Yeah, no, I'm impressed with the level of organization for sure. And I'm thinking back and comparing the way we did it when we outlined it in the last episode. When we just did it, we didn't have anyone to talk to about it. We just kind of shot from the hip. So it's very, very nice to see the level of understanding of the concepts going into your planning. I think, as I said before, it's like so key to think about that. And I think if anyone gets anything out of this conversation, I think it is about understanding the connections amongst the concepts, and it's necessary to think about that before you start, say, making a planning document yourself. So great job here. We are impressed. And as Kyle said, would love to talk to you after you've taught this and see what things you've changed, what you learned along the way. So it would be great to have you back again on another episode to kind of next year, once you've put this into place. I think that would be great for people to listen to.
Yeah, I'd also like to reiterate on that planning, as somebody that just did it. I could not have done this without the planning. Mm-hmm. I also felt that the planning was so important for me as I was making decisions. You know, in the past, we've had these geometry units and it's like, oh, well, we're doing constructions for 2 weeks. And there was no reason for doing the constructions. It's like, okay, well, it's just part of the unit. And now it's like, oh, well, really, we're going to be doing these constructions. It's great for problem solving, especially if you like problematize them. Like, can you construct this, and having kids work collaboratively to do so? Like, that's great. But then really getting to that idea that, you know, you can kind of use this concept of constructions to establish the triangle congruence postulates, and that we're setting them up for that. So the reason that we're spending all this time on the constructions is so that they're ready to kind of engage in maybe some more meaty concepts of proof and justification. Right. And these are understandings that I'd never had before. So being able to go through and kind of ask myself, like, what are the key concepts? What are the big questions? Why am I doing this? Has been super helpful in this plan.
Michael, again, I think you've done so much work in knowing and kind of being, I don't want to say a part of the whole journey, because we definitely weren't, but, you know, you've done a lot of this work on your own. But the one thing I want to make sure that people are aware is that you didn't try to do it completely independently. So right from the beginning, when you were in the workshop last fall, you know, there was lots of talk about it in the discussion area. Currently in the academy, you're still right in there and talking about it and really doing a lot of co-learning with people out there. And I know that you're going to be a huge asset to the rest of that Math Moment Maker community. So a huge, huge thank you to you for being vulnerable enough to come on here, not just once, but twice, to share on the podcast. And as we had mentioned beforehand, we'd love to be able to take the video we shot while we were having this discussion so that those who are in the academy can really dive in a little bit deeper. And then hopefully others in the academy who are doing something like what you're doing, and maybe they're doing it in a different way, we'll try to get on for some episodes as well, try to get different perspectives in here. We can all learn from one another. I know for me, a big takeaway was starting with those big ideas like you had done in your planning process. You had spent, you know, I'm going to say 80% of the work was in the pre-planning. And the small amount of work is actually now where you place everything and the little adjustments and even the tasks. I know that's a big job too. But as more and more people are doing the work like you're doing here and sharing that out, people will have at least a great place to start to know that, okay, these tasks are great for these ideas. And here's some really cool big ideas that I can sort of start with. And then I'm just going to modify to suit my own context, my own class, my own course. So thank you to that or for that. John, any last minute comments here, or are we ready to wrap this thing up?
Yeah, I think we are ready. Before we go, we would love for you, Michael, I know that you were ready for this. Do you want to chat about what, say, your big takeaway was for today?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there were so many, but I think the one that really resonated with me was especially in this idea of spiraling, where you're not just dealing with like one big idea at a time, is how important it is to make those connections to the big main ideas and the concepts explicit so that students really understand that, hey, we're solving this problem today, but this is similar to the concept that we studied 2 weeks ago. We're just using like a different strategy or different method. And these are the reasons we're using that different strategy or method, but we're really solving the same types of problems. We're thinking about the same ideas. That was really helpful, that idea that we should consolidate every day, maybe not at the beginning of the lesson because you don't want to ruin the surprise of the task, but definitely by the end that you make those connections so kids walk away understanding that. That was really helpful.
Amazing.
Great.
Amazing.
Good.
That's super helpful. Well, thanks so much again, Michael. We really appreciate your time. And as mentioned, we're learning from one another. I know John and I picked up a huge amount of ideas. I love the way you've structured your planning. So we're definitely going to be keeping a copy of that for our own explorations as we move forward. And hopefully we will continue to see you around the community area of the Math Moment Maker community inside the Academy. And we will be up to date, I'm sure, throughout the year as things go and as you pivot and continue planning and pivoting along your spiraling journey.
Absolutely. Sounds great.
All right. Have a great one. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. You too.
As always, both John and I learned so much from these Math Mentoring Moment episodes, but in order to ensure we hang on to this new learning, let's be sure to reflect on the big ideas and big takeaways that we've learned. An excellent way to do this and help learning stick is to reflect and create a plan for yourself to take action on something that resonated with you in this episode. A great way to hold yourself accountable is to write it down, and even better, share it with someone, your partner, colleague, or with the Math Moment Maker community by commenting on the show notes page, tagging at Make Math Moments on social media, or in our free private Facebook group, Math Moment Makers K through 12.
Another great way you can take action is to take the action that Michael did and do a deep dive with us in our 6-module online workshop each spring and fall, where we coach you step by step on how to create and modify your lessons to engage students, build deeper understanding of math, and promote resilience in problem solving. With over 250 educators already through the program, we're confident you too can create resilient, engaged problem solvers, just like Michael has learned how to do.
And if taking a deep dive isn't enough, the workshop is accredited for 2 to 4 PD credit hours through Brandman University. If you are interested in learning more about registering, be sure to check out makemathmoments.com/online workshop. Remember, registration closes soon, so head over to makemathmoments.com/online workshop.
Are you interested in joining us on the podcast for an upcoming Math Mentoring Moment episode where you too can share a big math class struggle? You can apply over at makemathmoments.com/mentor. That's makemathmoments.com/mentor.
In order to ensure you don't miss out on any episodes, be sure to tap the subscribe button in your favorite podcasting platform. And if you like what you're hearing, do us a huge solid and be sure to share the podcast with a colleague and help us reach a wider audience by leaving us a review on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, or whatever platform you are listening to this on. Every bit helps.
Show notes and links to resources from this episode can be found at makemathmoments.com/episode 42. Again, that's makemathmoments.com/episode 42.
Well, until next time, I'm Kyle Pierce.
And I'm John Orr.
High fives for us.
And high fives for